This season's Premier League had absolutely everything. We had a title race that went all the way to the end, and we had a relegation dogfight involving points deductions and all sorts of other caper in between. And all the way through the season, there was so many teams that had injury crises and a really bad stretch of VAR and refereeing decisions and everything else. And the Premier League, especially if you're a distance fan like me, there's so many teams that you can attach yourself to, you can follow, you can root for, and hope that they do pretty well. And for me, one of those clubs that's always been, I hope they do well this season, I hope they do a little bit better, is Crystal Palace, because their fan base for me definitely stands amongst the top across all of English football, really, for passion, for colour, for energy from the terraces, absolutely everything. This season I did plan on getting down to Selhurst Park to watch Crystal Palace in the league myself, but it just never happened, sadly. Last year I went to see Aston Villa at Villa Park when Crystal Palace came to town, and the away section that Palace brought with them was eye-catching to say the least, a very, very good away section. But when we come into this year with Roy Hodgson still as manager, I made a video right at the beginning of the season saying, look, Palace are just sleepwalking their way into mediocrity here. Roy Hodgson cannot be the long-term manager, the long-term solution for what they've got going on, and all the assets that they have, the first team best 11 type players that they've got, Eze's and Elise's, these types of guys, as well as a very well-renowned and established academy system that they've got for bringing through their own players into the first team. And Palace's story this season started off really quiet and really sleepy, drifting away into oblivion, and then come February we got Oliver Glasner in town, which I'm really pleased to say was my shout to be Crystal Palace manager all the way back in August or October. And now that the season's all said and done, it's report card time here on the channel, where we're looking at all the clubs that we've followed across the year and having a look at the season in the cold light of day. How well did they do? Were they overachieving, underachieving? What was the transfer policy like? How did that influence the season, as well as the dugout, the managers? In this case, two of them. How did they ride the fixtures? What sort of results came the team's way? In this case, Crystal Palace. What obstacles did they have to overcome? Ultimately, was the season a success or a failure? As well as giving out some player awards for a breakout player of the season, always catches my attention, as well as a rising star, a younger player that really does announce himself as being elite caliber quality. And like any good report card, we always finish off with some to-do lists, some notes to take forward into next season. At any point in the video, if you do laugh, you learn, you like something or whatever, please do like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this, not just for Premier League clubs, but across European and world football, as we get into a summer that is going to have a very, very busy transfer rumour mill, as well as the Euros and everything else in between. And get into the comment section on this one and let me know what your big takeaway was from Crystal Palace's year, and your hopes and expectations for next season would be fun as well. And let's just get stuck straight into it. Now, before we can have a look at the Premier League table for this season, we need to really have a look at where Crystal Palace were coming into this year to get a real idea of, their current standings and what a reasonable expectation of success would have been coming into this year. If we look at the 22-23 season, Crystal Palace finished in 11th with 15 losses, 49 goals conceded and only 40 scored. Scoring goals, winning games, it was a huge, huge problem. 12 draws tells you they were hard to beat, but with only 11 victories. They are just so far disconnected from the top end of the table and maybe having a shot of getting into European football. And then looking at the table, how it sits for the end of the 23-24 season, Crystal Palace find themselves in the top half of the table. They've got one position better off, finishing in 10th. They've managed to get 2 more victories, but it's the goals scored column that really catches my eye. Almost a 50% uplift, and yet the defensive record is basically the same. They've not had much improvement defensively as a whole across this season. But as we know, with 2 managers at the helm, this is really a tale of 2 halves across this season. And if we look at the form table over the last 15 games in the Premier League, Oliver Glasner was in charge of 14 of these games. Crystal Palace are sitting in 6th. And when we look at the most important columns, goals scored and wins, etc., it makes for really pleasing reading, and it gives Crystal Palace fans and Oliver Glasner and everyone else associated with the club, I think, a lot of reason to be happy and optimistic about going into next year. So I think, considering there's been a severe change of manager here, a totally different play style, and considering how bad it was when Roy Hodgson was still around, I would consider this season, in terms of where Palace have finished ultimately and everything else that goes along with that, a pass mark. I definitely think they've just about got there. The worry under Roy Hodgson is just generally Crystal Palace and, in general, for the last 2 or 3 seasons is just bang average, mid-table mediocrity, not really within a threat of getting into the European places, and probably being good enough more often than not, maybe with individual brilliance as Zaha, historically, to be involved in any severe relegation fight, you know. Or if they are, they'll just change manager, get somebody in. So yeah, I think we can give Crystal Palace a pass for this season, no two ways about it. Now, the summer and the January transfer windows are the two key points of the season where managers and clubs have got the opportunity to reinforce their ranks, to strengthen their squad, to really help them go on and achieve their goals. And when we look at the outgoings for across the full season for Crystal Palace, they've not actually raised any money. They've not actually been selling anyone for any significant fees across these windows. They've let go of, you know, Guaita, Butland, Milivojevic, Zaha, all on free transfers, all pretty considerable earners at the club, certainly. So from last season coming into this year, they weren't really any worse off. Zaha, as we know, is a key talisman for the club over, you know, the last decade, it feels like. I don't know how long it's actually been, but you did feel there was a wee bit of Starman reliance at Crystal Palace. If there was no Zaha, there was no party. So I think him moving on, Crystal Palace moving on, it was kind of one of those ones where, you know, even if it is a free transfer, you just kind of accept it and move on at this stage. But, you know, no massive transfer like injection from selling a young prospect like Wan-Bissaka, you know, any of these types of things, which makes the incomings not look as bad. But I do think for a Premier League club that Crystal Palace have really been sleeping at the wheel here. Adam Wharton and Daniel Munoz, we know they came in the January window as, you know, they're really clutching at straws, trying to improve the quality of the squad, keep Roy in charge, and, you know, try and get away from the relegation fight that, thankfully, because of all the points deductions that were happening, it did look quite quickly that Palace might have been pretty safe, even with Roy in charge. But summer additions, Matthias Franca, Dean Henderson, Rob Holding, Jefferson Lerma, you know, none of these guys really make a material difference to the squad, to the best 11. And I don't think when any of them signed, you know, Henderson's going to fight for the goalkeeper position and Franca is a hotly touted wonder kid. But considering the year before, Crystal Palace had only won 11 games and had only scored 40 goals, there was not enough quality added into this Crystal Palace team for my liking. And given the amount of money that was spent across all these transfers, we're talking about 6 to 8 million, which is a net spend. I'm not too sure, but the exception of Wharton and Munoz, who came in January, you would really be able to see any difference in that Crystal Palace team until those two arrived. So I would definitely be giving the summer transfer policy, the transfer business that they did in the summer, a huge fail. But I think that January business they've done was next level. You know, Munoz being a real dark horse addition to the Premier League. Nobody really knew how good he would be moving in from Belgium, and he's hit the ground running in a big way. And taking that chance on an up-and-coming wonder kid paid off big time. Obviously, Wharton now in the provisional England squad for the Euros. So we've got a really big fail and a really big pass. So I think just about we can call that a pass mark for Crystal Palace for their transfer business this year, thanks to the high-quality additions that they made in January. Now, it may sound like I'm trashing Roy Hodgson a little bit much here, because I do respect everything he's done in the game and for Crystal Palace in general, but he came out of retirement to save them from relegation, and then it did just feel like he was staying there because they had no one else. And, you know, when you've not got that synergy of motivation to improve and kick on, and it's just like, I'm clocking in, doing my job and getting out. Not saying he didn't have ambition or like vigor or whatever, but look at the results. Opening game of the season, 1-0 win against Sheffield, and we know how bad Sheffield United were this year. A narrow loss to Arsenal looks impressive enough when you then draw with Brentford and beat Wolves, but once you get past that 1-0 win against Man United, it's not great reading for Crystal Palace. A lot of losses, conceding a lot of goals, home and away in quick succession. And yeah, it's a Premier League. There's never really any easy games, but they are really struggling to score goals again. Surprise, surprise, and really struggling to get any sort of real run of consistency of victories on the go. And it's not until after this Chelsea game here, where it's off the back of a 4-1 loss to Brighton, 3-1 loss to Crystal Palace, which isn't too far removed from that 5-0 Arsenal loss, we see Roy Hodgson moved on and Oliver Glasner brought in. He's in the stands for the 1-1 draw against Everton, where we see the team already starts to look a bit like Oliver Glasner outfit. And really from there is where the season began for Crystal Palace. Adam Wharton starts to come into his own, and then Oliver Glasner with this newfound style of play that he's brought to the club. Like I said on his appointment, Crystal Palace became an absolute wild card for every team in the division because of, number one, the way Oliver Glasner plays. And no matter how much the rest of the league get used to the team or scout them and all the rest of it, I've seen him do this for Frankfurt in the Bundesliga, which is also a pretty good league, you might have noticed. And because it's so transition-based, 1-2 passes, let's go and attack, Like, you're not going to beat everyone with it, don't get me wrong, but you're going to be dangerous against virtually any opponent. And we've seen that, very quickly. 3-0 victory against Burnley was credible. Losing to Tottenham and Ange Ball, I think this was a game I said could have been the highest scoring game of the weekend, and Palace didn't quite get there. But even when you look at the lineups in these unfavourable results, Ayew started and come off injured. Mateta hasn't had a good game. Eze's come off at the 66th minute. He's just been coming back from injury. The Luton draw, no Elise again. The Forest draw, no Elise again. Mateta starts to find his form. Eze is starting to go up a level. And then still, again, 1-0 loss away to Bournemouth. Eze, Mateta, Ayew. 4-2 loss against City. Same thing again. But we see Elise, Edouard, Schlupp, these guys coming off the bench and making a bit of a difference. And really, I think the Oliver Glasner, good times really come in here. So how many games have we lost in this period? 3? Yeah. Crystal Palace lost 15 all season. And some of the ones like, that Roy Hodgson's kind of put on the books, as it were, if you think if Glasner could have his time back, he would have some better results here, I think, especially in the ones that are very close, like 0-0 against Fulham. That's just never happening again, is it? 1 each with Luton. Some of these games, I think Crystal Palace would have got positive results in, and you can see that with the 1-0 victory over Liverpool, being very good defensively and taking their chance when it came, as well as absolutely mugging off West Ham with a 5-2 win before then taking Newcastle down with a 2-0. The draw with Fulham wasn't 0-0 this time, was it? And then spanking Man U by 4-1, taking Wolves to task 3-1, and then Aston Villa, the babes of the season in terms of the ones that had got everyone's love and affection. And like, oh, look how great Villa are doing. Not so fast. Come to Selhurst Park and let's show you what this is all about. A 5-0 thumping towards the end of the year. So I do feel that the squad, like we've seen there, it has changed, but it's not been that deep of a squad. So it's not like, either Hodgson or Glasner have really had too many different tools to play with. Yeah, I know Elise, Eze, these guys have had spells out being injured, but the amount of goals and how many teams Crystal Palace are scoring against and putting to the sword is night and day. I think a lot of credit has to go to the players for so quickly adopting a new style of play, buying into it wholeheartedly, and then going out on the pitch and following it to the letter, because so many new managers come in and have to adapt and have to adjust and all this kind of stuff. And 9 times out of 10, this is player buy-in. If you get the guys absolutely tuned in that this is the way we're going to play now, this is the way going forward, and we're going to score, we're going to beat teams, and you can get that buy-in, then you can see the results it can get you. So huge credit has to go to the players, of course, if they're buying into a manager's tactics and philosophy. Of course, he gets huge credit, but the players have to apply themselves, have to commit to it. So I do feel huge credit and resilience does go to Crystal Palace here. And when we look at how they finished the season over the last 15 games, like, this kind of turnaround gives me like Unai Emery, Aston Villa vibes. It really, really does. And I think Crystal Palace have got so much to be excited for coming into next year. In terms of both the managers, I think Roy Hodgson again gets a hard fail on the season. Didn't develop the team, didn't get them scoring any more goals. Yeah, there was an okay result or two here or there. But again, I feel that he carries the can for the summer transfer window, especially not being as proactive. And Oliver Glasner, how can he not get huge pass marks? So I think, again, the aggregate of the fail and the pass across Hodgson and Glasner, we would give Palace a pass. It was a very good season for them on the pitch in terms of a style of play developing and them not just improving where they were in the table, but actually on the pitch, looking more like a team that can do something, that can affect games, can beat anyone, and ultimately keep on improving. Now, the 2 awards I like to give out when we do this report card is the breakout star and the rising star. Now, for me, the breakout star, you could maybe give it to Jean-Philippe Mateta. Maybe there's a case for an Elise or an Eze, but I think we know Elise and Eze are elite quality. We've known that for some time. And Mateta, he's been undeniable, but I don't know if at his age and stuff like that, you can really say, oh, it's his breakout year. He's definitely shown in a breakout fashion that he's Premier League level, finally. But for me, the breakout star of the season has to be Tyrick Mitchell. Now, I think we knew coming into this year that Tyrick Mitchell could and would be a worthwhile left-back for Crystal Palace. As you can see, he has been making appearances for a very, very long time. He is not a new name in town, as it were. And although he has been, playing pretty well in the Premier League, especially over the last couple of months, he has really broken out of his shell and really showed that he is a top-end Premier League left-back now that can not just do all the basic defending stuff that I think we've seen from him from the largest time, but like we've seen over the last few months, he can be a real asset in attacking play. And for the Oli Glasner system and for modern fullbacks, you need to be able to have both sides of the game in your arsenal, in your repertoire. And I wasn't sure this kid had it. And I think now he really does put himself, for me, as being the best English left back in the or just the best English left back. He's been so good with tackles, interceptions, pass completions, crosses into the box. He really does have everything in his game. And, you just need to look at his form under Roy Hodgson. It's very bland. Not much going on. Yeah, there's a wee bit of attacking output against Burnley and some other bits and pieces here and there, an assist against Wolves. But it's the period that we see under Glasner. His ratings out of 100 really do jump up. Look at this performance against Bournemouth where, yeah, it's been a 1-0 loss, but he's been very effective defensively and in attack. In the Liverpool game, a 91 rating out of 100. He got the assist, of course, but he's contributing to both sides of the game in high, successful volume. That's what these statistics lean towards. Successful actions, a 92 score against Man United with a goal and a last man tackle. For me, Tyrick Mitchell is the most slept on left back now in the league, and he is the breakout star of Crystal Palace this season for me. Now sadly we don't have a picture of him, but undoubtedly, easy peasy, the rising star, the guy that's came out of obscurity into the limelight to say, I am an elite Premier League performer and I'm going to be a key player in this team for years and years to come, hopefully if they can hang on to him, is of course Adam Wharton, the January signing from Blackburn Rovers. And since, when you see like Morgan Rogers, Adam Wharton, Ollie Watkins in the past, Ivan Toney, there's been a lot of players that have excelled in the Championship, and there's always that question of how good can they be, how good will they be in the Premier League, and especially coming into a Crystal Palace team that at the time were going nowhere fast. This kid has not looked out of his depth for 1 minute. Upon arrival, this guy was kicking ass and taking names, and in that midfield engine room, he just does look like he's been there his whole life. He looks very, very comfortable. He's making huge contributions in huge matches in that engine room, which is like a very busy job next to Will Hughes or Jefferson Lerma, whoever he's been paired with, either to carry the ball out from defence, be able to ping balls into channels and over the top for a lot of the counter-attacks to happen, as well as stopping teams counter-attacking on you, being in the right position at the right time to break something up, and then being cool, calm and collected to be able to deal with possession and cycle it around however the manager sees fit. And yeah, I don't think anyone who's watched Crystal Palace would argue with the fact that Adam Wharton is 100% the rising star coming out of this team for this season. So if you look at the Crystal Palace squad, where is it sitting at the moment? How good is it? What do they need to get in the summer to make sure they can action the Oli Glasner dream, as it were, and get them higher in the table and get them qualified for European football? Because for me, that has to be the goals, that has to be the ambitions. Now, I think when we look at the squad numbers, like there's pretty actually decent numbers, good coverage per position across most areas of the pitch here at a decent enough Crystal Palace mid-table sort of quality. The big question is going to be keeping a hold of Eze and Olise in this transfer window. And for me, I would be quite hopeful for Crystal Palace that they could keep a hold of both of these kids, as long as, I say kids, it's not Arsenal, City, maybe Liverpool. But I think as long as it's not one of those two teams, Crystal Palace are probably going to be quite safe from any vultures kind of start circling around and trying to pluck out their best talents. I think Olise would really, really suit Man City for a lot of ways, and I think Eze would be phenomenal at Arsenal. But I just don't see either one of those clubs spending the money required to get these guys out of Palace. And subsequently, if they're not going to spend the money, I'm not too sure who would. So I'm sure the rumour mill is going to be mad for these guys all summer long. But I wouldn't be, unless one of them has a great Euros. I know Eze's made the England squad. I wouldn't be too nervous if I was a Crystal Palace fan, is all I'm saying. But I do think, when you look across the spine of the team, Wharton, huge, Hughes, not huge, Doucouré, he's actually tiny, Lerma, Riedewald, for two starting midfielders, I feel that there's good enough depth there. Just having to manage League Cup and FA Cup, I think the midfield department looks really strong. And on the right side of defence here, there is a lot of options if everyone is fit and available. So I don't think there's a great need for too much in terms of additions and quality. The number one thing is going to be hanging on to the best players in the squad. But I think with the main surgery that's going to happen in this transfer window under Oli Glasner is going to be, a bit of a cull on guys that aren't going to fit the system, aren't good enough to hang about for the next 2 or 3 seasons. So we could see the likes of Ward or Klein, maybe one of these guys, maybe a Jeffrey Schlupp, an Odsonne Edouard. I think Edouard's probably going to leave. Tompkins, let's just forget him for a second. Holden's just signed on a decent contract. Ward is a bit of a cult hero as far as I see it at Crystal Palace. And yeah, maybe it's end of the road for Klein. But I feel that this is going to be getting guys that fit the Oli Glasner system, because it's really high intensity. And if you do lose like Adam Wharton or something like that, or you do lose a Tyrick Mitchell, you definitely do need to have cover to keep the system to the same high standards. I don't really expect Crystal Palace to go and splash huge cash and bring in stars galore. Now, if they did lose Eze or Elise, I could see them really going into Europe and getting an apex, Glasner prototype player to play in the front line so that quality does maintain. But outside of that, I think Palace will be really shrewd, and we'll probably see like half a dozen Daniel Munoz's come into the squad, guys that profile really well, hit the numbers, have the ability to action out this style of play at a decent enough level already. And I think when Crystal Palace do add in that transfer market moneyball aspect into the already amazing academy they've got going there, this could be a real moment in time for Crystal Palace where they go from having a huge potential to be a much bigger club to realising their potential and starting getting into Europe every other year, if not every year. The only place I could see Palace spending big money is in the attacking zone here, because with Franca having potential unyet seen, Raksaki, I seen this guy early season, he looked really nippy by the way, but we know that Andre Ayew isn't a goal machine, and Mateta's doing great now, but who knows how long for, and strikers just are never ever cheap. So I think another striker option to push Mateta, or maybe even replace him, depending on does he keep the form up, is the new guy better? I could see that. But otherwise, I think Palace have just got to keep the best 11 fit and start to complement them. Again, I'll say Aston Villa again, similar to the way Villa have, by getting guys that are definitely good enough in the league, or really using, the manager to use his nous to go around European and world football and snap up some high value, good bang for buck, good, transfer fees. Don't need to be astronomical if you really know what you're looking for and you know where to look. And you only need to look at the transfer business that Glasner did at Frankfurt to know that he does know how to unearth a gem. He does know where to look to get the sort of players that fit his system and can hit the ground running. And then, as if by magic, Crystal Palace make their first summer signing. And honestly, I couldn't have wrote it any better. After I'd recorded the video, we've had to come back in with this, because just like I was laying out on the tactics board here, the number one thing they have to add in, it's a bit of left-sided, not quite all the way left-sided cover, and, good worthy squad players that can push the first 11 and maybe even get into it. And thankfully, this is a player I know a thing or two about. Chadi Riyad has been kind of in and out the Real Betis team this year, and Betis have had a real good couple of transfer windows of building in young attacking talent, or in the case of like Fornals, who's a bit more famous for going there along with Isco over the last couple of windows, a bit of experienced know-how as well in the attacking areas. But Betis's defence has been filled with a lot of up-and-coming talents. And Chadi Riyad, although not ever present this year, is showing that he is a capable left-sided defender now. In this Oli Glasner system, he will be competing for this position here. Now, we did see Mark Guy actually fill into midfield in the last game of the season. And I think maybe even once as well coming off from the bench. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was something else afoot here that we're not quite privy to yet, or we've had maybe the first teases of. But Chadi Riyad is definitely a defender that can come in and supplement this back three against, suspension, fitness and all the rest of it. And he's a player that's only going to get better alongside the likes of Anderson. Maybe even he replaces Richards if maybe Richards isn't your cup of tea. I think Richards is good enough to play in a back three like this, to be honest with you, but he could do this kind of thing as well. We've even seen Anderson on the right with Guy in the middle. We've seen a few different combinations. It has been when subs have been coming on and they've been just been kind of sensibly rotating, but the back three can really rotate now in a few more different ways depending on what side the pace is on, where does his target man go, if you're going to slightly adapt for the opponent. And I think this is a great signal of intent, a transfer that didn't cost the earth, but makes a big difference to the defence right away. And then if Mark Guy is sold, because Crystal Palace don't really want to sell Eze and Olise, so maybe selling somebody like Guy or Mitchell might make that a little bit easier. And, having a ready-made replacement in situ, that could be something to watch out for as well. I do expect Crystal Palace to be fighting for European spots on the table next season, getting into the top 8, top 7. And I think, probably the main part is holding on to Olise and Eze, but I've got full confidence the manager in place could replace them if needed to. But I think the expectations for Palace coming into this year is European qualification, or certainly to be fighting in amongst it like a dog-eating beetroot. And I'm looking forward to seeing who Palace do get linked with, looking to see who they do sign and who could come in to enhance and to complement the squad that they've already got there. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. On screen are now some other stuff that I've made that YouTube thinks you might enjoy. Don't forget to get into the comment section and let me know what your hopes and aspirations are for next season for Crystal Palace. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more content like this. Stay out of trouble, and I'll catch you on the next one.